we'll keep rolling in, but I'll go ahead and kick us off. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining. I know a lot of you have been joining several of these webinars, which is amazing, and maybe some folks joining just for the first time. So for that, I'll just give a little introduction to Bikepacking Roots for anyone who doesn't know us already. We are a national nonprofit, a 501c3 nonprofit. We're solely focused on supporting and growing the bikepacking community. Our three pillars are ride, connect, and protect. So we're really focused on, we develop and support local route creators on creating safe, legal, well-resourced routes all around the country. We're really interested in lowering barriers to entry to bikepacking through educational programming like this free virtual workshop series. We'll be doing working with regional stewards around the country to host beginner-friendly bikepacking events, and another program that we're going to be kicking off, our third round of BIPOC Bike Adventure Grants. We'll be fundraising for that later in the month if folks are interested in supporting that program. And then we also do advocacy, so working, to for the rights for bikepackers as a user group to recreate on public lands, and also to make sure that we are responsible stewards and advocating to protect those lands, and supporting local communities that we ride through, and a lot of other things. So if you're not already a follower of Bikepacking Roots, hopefully you will be in the future, and welcome everyone to the webinar. Do you want me to do the ground rules too?
Sure.
Just to touch base on those. So yeah, everyone feel free to use the chat and post these workshops have been really interactive, which is helpful. So feel free to answer each other's questions, or if Kate has call outs for folks to chime in. If you have specific questions that you want answered, there will be breaks throughout the presentation. So if you can put those in the Q&A section, so kind of differentiate the chat and the Q&A. Also, as I said before, if you can if you want everybody to see your chat, just change that to everyone from hosts and panelists. And then, yeah, we'll have time at the end. We've mostly handled Q&A through the chat, but there might be, depending on time, some opportunities for questions at the end. And then everyone who's attending this and everyone who registered will get an email. Usually I send them out by Friday with the resources and the recording and information about registering for future workshops. So I will hand it over to you, Kate.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. This is workshop number 5, and I'm really excited for this topic, which we'll get into in a moment. But quick introduction of myself. If you haven't been here for the prior workshops, I'm Kait Boyle. I'm a founder of Bikepacking Roots, and now I work primarily on education and community-based projects for Bikepacking Roots. I started bikepacking in 2010 on my steel single speed on the Great Divide mountain bike route, which you can see in the upper left-hand corner photo. And that proved to be a fairly life-changing ride, as it is for so many people, because it showed me how transformative experiences you can have on a bike while moving through a landscape at a pace that you can both see changes in the landscape, digest those changes, and connect with it, whether it's the natural environment or the human environment. And that has led to amazing opportunities to teach bikepacking in building on a career in adventure education, where I taught for Knowles Outward Bound at Prescott College, including the first ever college level bikepacking course with our co-founder, Kurt Refsnyder, Geology Through Bikepacking. And since then, that's led to bikepacking around the world on 5 different continents, everything from some more road-based touring to taking my skis on my bike to go on multi-day ski expeditions, to bikepacking using huts and gondolas in Europe to ride as much high-quality trail and big descents as possible. So these days, bikepacking is a way to continue to explore new places, find opportunities for personal growth and challenge in the mountains, and my favorite way of moving in the mountains, the bike. I should mention, as it's relevant to this workshop, I also had a career in ultra endurance racing. Some people call it bikepack racing. I raced self-supported um, multi-day races and 24-hour races, which I am a firm believer that I am not especially physically gifted. I am just have developed an incredible skill set at taking care of my body and my mind, which is really, I don't really have a number, but we can just call it 90% of what leads to success in those types of events. And so whether they're non-competitive or competitive, big expeditionary level challenges, the mind and body self-care has been a huge part of my own story, which then led me to have the skills to recover from a quadruple fractured pelvis and sacrum and ruptured bladder that I sustained in a traumatic car accident about 5 years ago. And the recovery from that was really made possible through practicing a lot of these skills that I'll talk about tonight. So this topic is near and dear to my heart. I think that it's really the skill set that lets us tap into our human potential, both on and off the bike. And I'm really excited to dig into it. Should also share that our technical difficulty when folks were signing on was that my presenter notes are not here. So you get the original, it's not off the hip because this is all very planned out slideshow, but very natural and intuitive speaking. So bear with me. So this topic, I just really spoke to why this is important to me. This is its own workshop in this series because while gear is important, route planning is important, food and water is important, backcountry skills are important, navigation is important. As I said, a huge piece of these multi-day endeavors on our bike are our ability to kind of tap into our human potential by taking care of our physical body and being tuned into our mental landscape because our brains carry a lot of power. So the way that we're going to break this down is in 3 parts tonight. The first part is a bit of thinking about self-awareness because that is a huge foundation for then how we connect to and understand our physical needs and our mental capacity. And so while there aren't a ton of tools we'll specifically talk about under self-awareness, we're just going to explore that concept so that you can move into the rest of the topic with some mindfulness. The second part is the body, and there's some like pretty basic physiological things around riding bikes for long distances, multiple days in a row, that can make your ride either incredibly uncomfortable or actually really enjoyable and pretty pain-free and comfortable. And then there's figuring out how to turn the uncomfortable into comfortable. What both prior to going bikepacking and while out there. And then lastly, we have the mind, both the things that bikepackers can be presented with that can be mental challenges, and then tools for navigating those lows. And that is the flow for the next hour and 15 minutes. After each session, there'll be a Q&A. And so if you have questions as I'm talking, as Noelle said, just drop those in the Q&A. And then we'll pause in between each section so that I can have a sip of water and address questions as they develop. And we'll end with questions as well. So the first one is this self-awareness piece. There, as we go into more of the mental challenges, but also starting at the beginning with planning a trip, the first thing and one of the most important things I think is understanding why you're doing something. Why is it that you bike pack? And so we're going to kick this off with a poll, and that'll pop up in just a moment, but there are going to be a number of different options. And I would just love for you to go ahead and select all of the reasons that apply to you. And as you'll see at the bottom, there's an other section. So if there's a reason on here that I didn't list, which there very well likely will be, please just type that reason in the chat so that we can note those. And I think that it's very good and normal to have many different reasons that you bike pack, and just taking a moment to think about what really resonates with you. Like, what is it that pulls at your soul that makes you want to go on a bike packing trip? Oh, I love this other reason: to explore history. Yeah, and that picture is in the Alps on that gondola and yurt-based trip, and Kurt Restreiner took that. Oh, I love the just to see if I can. Yeah, like what's possible. Awesome. So you can continue to fill this out. It looks like in this group, we have a huge inclination to go explore new landscapes and places. That for me is a very strong one. The backcountry experience, the joy of riding a bike. You know, if you're bikepacking, you're probably going to get to ride your bike a lot. And so loving it is a very powerful reason. Companionship and camaraderie is often one. Traveling by bike, you know, not just the backcountry experience, but actually going into other communities, adventure. Um, so at Bikepacking Roots, pretty early, I guess this is the 2016 Bikepacking Roots Community Survey, which is really interesting because we officially launched in 2017. We polled the community, and I think it'd be really interesting to do this again since our community is so much bigger than it was then. But what aspects of bikepacking are most enticing to you? And really similar to you all, a huge percentage of people were drawn to the backcountry experience, traveling by bike, exploring new landscapes, the physical challenge. Pretty small component, which given the timing of our founding was interesting, was that competitive reasons were not very high. The gear was not a very huge element. And so whether, regardless of what it was that is most compelling to you, just keep that in mind as we go through the presentation tonight and as you go forth on your bikepacking trips. One thing is on this list and in that survey, and then also when you think about what motivates you to go bikepacking, like sometimes the stats. I don't think I put that on there as an option, but like having the numbers add up on your GPS, or like all the calories that you feel like maybe you earned could be a reason as well. When we get into the planning of trips as for self-awareness piece, but also the mindset and thinking about motivation as a tool for our mental toolbox, understanding the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation is helpful, because intrinsic motivation comes from within and extrinsic motivation arises from external factors. And so intrinsic motivation is really important to be able to tap into and identify. And most of the options on this list are very intrinsic motivation based. They're based on personal values, like things that you want to experience in your life that you feel inside you. Whereas the extrinsic motivation, like the gear or the competition or the statistics or like those, or the praise, you know, the wow factor from other people, you know, when you go home and tell people about your trips, those are extrinsic motivators, and those aren't necessarily bad. There's just a difference. And it's the extrinsic motivators that those can be fleeting. And in the toughest times, those can be the ones that don't necessarily prove to be quite as motivating or quite as resilient against other challenges. And so while they have their place for sure, which we will circle back to, they also understanding the difference and being able to tap into what is it that is most motivating to you internally, and then what are for you as an individual, what's also motivating externally. And we'll circle back to that. But now, the opposite, maybe the opposite, but very related to the thing, your why for bikepacking is, what are the things that challenge you? And this is, again, a very personal thing. Like, this is a very long list, and I'm sure you could add more. And just to run through them, this is what basically a list of things that I have felt challenged by bikepacking and other things. But bonking, running out of energy, feeling grumpy and loopy. Physical challenge of loaded endurance riding. Unexpected technical challenges by the route and terrain. Note unexpected. More physical challenge than expected. There's a theme here. Long flat roads. Long technical descents. Maybe you're walking downhill. A lot of cyclists don't like to hike their bike downhill, me included. Long hike bikes, uphill or downhill. Riding among traffic. Body aches, sore bum saddle area, numb hands and feet, being cold, being hot, running out of food and water, being uncertain about where your next food or water or shelter is, feeling scared for your personal safety or scared of people and strangers. Itinerary pressure, feeling like you have to make it somewhere and finish in X number of days. Pressure from peers and riding partners to ride a certain pace, whether it's faster or slower than you want to be going, or stopping more or not stopping enough. Negative energy from riding partners, their own challenges, getting lost and missing turns, mechanicals, boredom, weather, which could be all sorts of weather, but just listed wind, rain, sun, etc., and fear of animals. And so with that, we have another poll, and this is what challenges you bikepacking. And I would like to just take a moment for you to just identify any, select for you, what of these have the ability to be challenges. As I believe that there are some people out there who are not challenged physically or mentally by being hot, or are not challenged physically or mentally by riding on a long flat road. But knowing as we move forward what it is that you find challenging, that information helps us move forward with our physical self-care and mental self-care. Bonking, I think it's challenging for everyone, really. Yeah, there's a lot of physical challenge elements here coming up that is common because bikepacking is hard. There's really no two ways about it. When you put weight on a bicycle and pedal it, it is hard. Oh, I like the poor sleep one. That's a really good addition. Fear of riding solo. Yep. That's a good one. Fear of the unknown. Yeah, I think that would be also fear of uncertainty, which might be on here. But yeah, so this isn't it doesn't matter how many people select one or the other, or how few people select one or the other, because the point of this is to just take a moment to self-reflect on what is challenging for you in any particular circumstance. Keeping batteries charged. Oh yeah, that's a really good one. Yeah, other people when riding solo. The post bikepacking challenges are real too. Nice. Awesome. So we're going to continue on with this. And again, this is just something to take mental note of, because when we're thinking about challenges and therefore self-care, both preventing and then managing challenges that come up, a lot of challenges that at first are mental can become physical. Sometimes I think I'm crazy because I know that if I'm mentally challenged, suddenly I feel really tired and really flat and like my legs feel heavy. But as soon as I deal with that mental challenge, my physical energy comes back. And then for a lot of people, I think it can be very common, especially in situations like this in this photo, When you're physically challenged, like you're really cold, maybe you're really hungry, then that also becomes a mental challenge. And so our three kind of categories for moving through this and managing these are in our planning for bikepacking trips, and then in our self-care when out there, and in the mental toolbox that we bring with us when out riding, and then choose to use when we're out there, which can often be the hardest part. So, with the planning, there was a whole workshop dedicated to planning your bikepacking trip. It was the first workshop. Though that will, if you weren't there, you will have the ability to go watch that again in the future once they're posted all online. But I just want to revisit it because for a lot of those challenges, and they can be managed in how you plan. A lot of the things that we have the potential to be challenged by, we can simply address in the route we select, the itinerary we build, the riding partners we agree to go out with, and how we communicate and make decisions. And so, even before heading out there, if you know that you're challenged by, say, um, the physical terrain or the physical challenge of challenging terrain, you can choose a route that is less challenging. Or if you do want to put yourself into that challenge, you can do some really good research in your route research to make sure that you actually understand like what it looks like. Like when there's a route that has, say, 16,000 feet of climbing and 213 miles, where are those climbs? What do those climbs look like? Is there one section of the route that is incredibly strenuous elevation gain and loss wise, and then a section that's flat? And in doing so, you can also come up with alternatives to your plan, because I'm a firm believer, to a lot of people's chagrin, that plans are meant to be broken. We make a plan so that once we're out there and we decide that there's something better that we could be doing that aligns better with our goals, like our why, we can change our plan. If you don't have the flexibility to change your plan, then the very least you can do is to make sure that the plan that you make in the first place is really truly aligned with your why. There are, in that route planning stage, there are a lot of resources for you to alleviate a lot of uncertainty and prepare for the conditions that you might expect. Our next workshop after this is with Ride with GPS, and we're going to learn a lot more about how that platform can be a tool for route development. So you can see here in this route, I just got to go bikepacking last week, and I made a route that combined Sarah Swallow's Sky Island loop with my favorite trail in the world, the Arizona Trail. And so I combined those, but then in my routes, I also saved a detour if we needed to change our plan for weather and water needs. And then I also saved the full Sky Islands Odyssey West Loop, which is a little different than the route that I had planned, so that if we didn't have time or energy, or for whatever reason, we weren't up for riding a final 50 miles of single track to end our route, we could finish on dirt roads. And so just in those steps, in doing some research ahead of time, I was alleviating some of the challenges that could arise through some of the uncertainty. And then one of the final things in this planning that transcends not just the planning phase, but also the while out riding phase, is if you are riding with other people, to really be communicative about what your goals are, because what your why could be very different from another person's why, and that ends up shaping what your itinerary looks like, what the tone of your ride looks like, what, even just from the moment you wake up until you get on your bike, like the pace of that looks, how that looks. And so a lot of the things that may inspire us to go bikepacking might not be the same as the person next to us. So when you go plan a route or a trip with someone, just make sure that you're clear with your goals and you understand theirs, so that at least you are on the same page and you can find ways to align with those goals. Because otherwise, that in itself can become a challenge, and a pretty challenging one at that. So that was kind of the introduction part of this, the self-awareness piece. Are there any questions just on the why and the challenges, and how you'd use planning as a tool for aligning your trip with your why and also for managing potential challenges. The next section is substantial in content.
Don't see any specific questions on that.
Great. That was a bit more of an introduction. So for the body, the preventing and managing physical ailments that are common for bike packers, we're going to talk about contact points, your hands, feet, and butt. We're going to talk about kind of muscles, joints that cyclists often deal with, inherent in riding a bike. And we're going to talk about self-care routines and practices. And then one thing I should share is that I'm not a doctor, and so or a physical therapist, and so none of these are medical advice. These are purely just based on experience. Here are some things for you to think about, and then to go seek more professional guidance for your body and your bike. So, on that note, the first thing is a bike fit. It's really easy to get away with a less well-fitting bike on shorter day rides or even longer day rides, but rides where your bike is lighter and you go home, you eat a nutritious meal, get a lot of sleep, maybe don't ride the next day or it's a shorter ride. But as soon as you're thinking about riding for longer days, back to back with less ideal recovery, the fit of your bike and with the added weight, the fit of your bike is really important. And just taking this step and then riding that bike in that setup before going bike packing can prevent so many of the physical challenges that we'll talk about next, which is why it's worth talking about. We talked about this all a bit in the bikes and gear workshop as well, which was workshop number 2. But a lot of people, myself included, like to raise their bars maybe a half spacer or so from maybe a more aggressive racing position, even a spacer, to have a slightly more upright position that will alleviate pressure on your hands and also reduce some of the strain of your neck of having to look up higher because you're crouched down lower. Can also help with backs. The proper saddle height, tilt, and fore aft of your saddle is important for all sorts of physical moving parts of your body. The proper reach and comfortable grips, a saddle fit for your butt, which often is not the saddle that comes on your bike, and shoes, insoles, and cleats and pedals that are fitted for you and not worn out, which I added not worn out because it's really easy to just let your pedals or your insoles and your cleats go on forever. And then suddenly those are worn out and causing knee problems. So that's just a checklist. If you haven't had a bike fit, can take that in and just emphasize the need for all day riding position and that your bike will be heavier. So getting into the contact points, the hands, a lot of bike packers have commonly have problems with their hands going numb. There are a number of bike packers out there who have bikepacking and bike pack racing for a long time who end up with carpal tunnel problems. And a few things that you can do, as I just mentioned in the fit, is just to think about where your bar height is in relationship to your saddle. To really be intentional about your grips and hand position in relationship to the terrain you're riding as well. And so a lot of bike packers will double wrap their bars with bar tape for drop bars, or find a thicker bar tape for flat bars with grips, a thicker foam grip like the Ergon GXR in the size large, or the types of grips that have a little wing for under your palm that helps give your hand more of an ergonomic position to sit in. And even the bars that have a tiny little bar end, all that just increases hand position options, which gives you the ability throughout the day to move your position and reduce that fixed in one place position that would lead to numbness or a lot of pressure on one part of your hand over the entirety of the day. As far as suspension, tires, and rotor size, I think a lot of people don't think about this part of their bike as being related to your hands, but like your hands in addition to holding yourself up, their primary role when riding a bike is to shift and to brake. And so if you can reduce hand fatigue by having stronger brakes, which would be larger rotors, that reduces how hard you're having to squeeze on the brake levers, especially on big descents. And then also having more suspension, or at least tires with higher volume and slightly, it wouldn't necessarily be lower pressure than you ride unloaded, but pressure that is appropriately allowing your tires to provide the suspension service that rubber can, versus the like hard basketball service that will then reverberate through your bars. One thing I didn't add is that there are also bars that have flex in them. Fast Company I know makes some, and they're just a little, like, they have this tiniest bit of suspension in them that lets the bars flex. And a lot of bike packers like those too. And then lastly, for hands, is related to hands being numb, is the temperature. And a lot of times, whether you're riding in the summer and you're starting early in the day, or you're riding through rainstorms, or you're riding in cooler seasons, just keeping your hands warm can be challenging. Anyone who's had the screaming barfies or the feeling of your hands being really cold and then rethawing knows the value of preventing that. And a couple simple things you can do when bike packing, where weight and space are important, is if you're riding in cold conditions, bring warm gloves. But even just bringing dish or latex gloves in your kit is a very light and small volume amount of space to take up way to just be able to keep your gloves, your cycling gloves, or like a thin camp liner glove, dry while you're riding and cut the wind. And that's been my go-to strategy for managing hand temperature on summer mountain riding trips, where it has snowed on me, but it's not necessarily winter. Okay, feet, the opposite of hands. So shoes, we're going to talk about shoes, socks, pedals, and again, warmth. I think I was thinking about how to phrase this, and for me, a rule of thumb, I generally with shoes and bike packing, is I wear a style of shoe that is made for slightly harder terrain or riding or style than I am bike packing on. And the way that to break that down would be, if I'm bike packing mostly on paved road, graded gravel road, and then I'm not really biking at all, I still personally wear a pretty stiff but a mountain bike shoe, because there still is tread, because I'm inevitably walking around. The last thing I want to do is be clomping around on shoes that I'm going to be falling on my face as soon as I go into a gas station, or not able to walk off into the woods to dig a cat hole. And then for any trip that involves more significant amount of walking, which could include being like my camp shoe, or wanting to go for a hike, or especially the sometimes dreaded hike a bike, I steer towards more of an enduro trail shoe, because a lot of those still have the stiffness that helps reduce foot fatigue in pedaling, and also has the sole and the flex that allows for great traction on, regardless of what the conditions are, whether it's like slick roots and rocks, or snow, or loose scree. And when thinking about shoes, and those are all for clipless pedals. I think I haven't personally ever ridden with flat pedals, but for those who bike pack with them, it seems like like that enduro style shoe for flat pedals works really well, or even like an approach shoe, and running shoes as well for people, especially if they like to go out on side excursions. So for that, I don't have as much advice as for the clipless. But regardless of the shoe style you choose, if you are going out on back-to-back long rides, like it is a big itinerary, or it's cool weather, and again, know your body, like what do your feet do after multiple days of hard riding? If you're prone to foot swelling, or you want to be able to wear warmer socks, consider sizing up a half a size. With socks, A lot of the foot care does come down to your feet and how sweaty they are. And then also the environment you're bike packing in, the easiest being the Southwest where it's warm and dry. The hardest being probably the winter, but also like really cool, wet conditions. And so foot care, knowing that it's pretty hard to keep feet completely dry, there are some strategies for reducing moisture, but um I try to think about I have my foot care when I'm riding and then I have my foot care at camp. The goal when I'm riding is for my feet to stay warm. My feet do fine generally if they get wet, and so I'll ride through creeks, I walk through creeks, and if I'm concerned about cold, I add plastic bags, or if it's a significantly colder trip, like a warmer sock, a neoprene sock, or shoe covers. But then at night, and I recycle my socks each day. And so for a long trip, I'd bring 2 pairs of riding socks. Most trips, I bring 1 pair of riding socks and I rinse them and I keep wearing them. And then for at night, I have a sacred pair of socks, and those live in my sleeping bag. They live in my dry bag, and I don't wear them until the last day. And I love the last day because I get to wear a clean pair of socks. um, but those socks are meant to stay clean, as in like they're not getting walked around in shoes, and they're definitely not getting ridden in, and they're dry. And I do everything I can to keep them dry. And so if it's wet at camp, then I take those off and I go outside without socks on to like pee or take care of whatever it is I need to take care of. But that active drying at night is plays a huge role in reducing things like trench foot or other non-freezing cold injuries. Um, and then as I mentioned with the bike fit, the pedals, cleats, and insoles just need to not be worn out because those things actually can lead to other foot or knee injuries. Okay, now a topic that everyone loves to talk about. Um, I think that there are people out there who believe that a part of riding bikes and a part of bike packing is having a sore butt or sore other parts. And I believe that that does not have to be true. And it can take a lot of work and money and time and maybe some discomfort to find the way to be able to ride without sore saddle area, but it is 100% worth it to be able to go ride your bike for days in and days out and not have a sore butt, because except for when you're standing, you basically are going to feel your butt. And if it's sore, then that is immediately one of those things that is going to be a challenge. So with the saddle, take the time to find the right saddle and don't try a new saddle bike packing. End of story. There are a lot of elements to making sure the saddle's set up right, between the angle, if it's wide enough for your sit bones. Cutouts, I think, are great. I think that there are people who don't need them. And there is such thing as both as too much cushioning and too little cushioning. But I don't think any butt is created equal. So that's for you to find your answer to. With shorts, there are a few strategies for preventing saddle sores, whether you wear chamois or not. We're going to talk about the not chamois on the next slide. But regardless, the seams of your shorts, the fabric of your shorts, and the padding of the chamois, if you have chamois, those are all things to be mindful of, because over time, those are all things that have the potential to create a lot of abrasion or soreness. There's no perfect answer for what fabric is the best or what chamois is the best and where seams should or shouldn't be. Although generally right down the middle is not the best seam placement. um Generally, until you have like a really dialed system, I recommend packing 2 pairs of shorts that are different when bike packing to mix up seams, so that one day you can ride 1 pair of shorts and then the next day you can switch shorts, and it gives your butt a different kind of feeling. And that day it's maybe dealing with those shorts in a different way. Soft unabrasive fabric. Same with chamois. If you bring chamois, bring 2 different ones with like different pads so that you have a different feeling. Especially if you're not confident that those chamois you can ride in and day out and just be happy as a clam. And then chamois cream, just like any other taking care of any other blister, as soon as you feel uncomfortable, take care of it. Put chamois cream on. The longer you wait, the worse it'll get. Okay, so with the chamois-free element, you may not be interested in going chamois-free. The reasons that I have not been wearing a chamois for 10 years are because the problems that I found were exacerbated by chamois were saddle sores, pressure points, and having a soggy butt. Because a chamois basically insulates everything, it prevents breathability in that region, and therefore the sweat and other bacteria that all mingles when riding and salt mixes all up and isn't actively drying or breathing as you're riding. And therefore saddle sores and pressure points, or saddle sores can be exacerbated by the soggy bum and chafing. The pressure points, this is just me, and a lot of people who I've talked to, but the more often a lot of padding on top of a saddle can create more pressure because you're just squishing fabric in between your bones, the bone structure of your pelvis, on top of the saddle. And so a lot of people who have found going chamois to be really successful are really appreciating that their skin is able to be cleaner and less irritated, because there's more breathability in your shorts, and it's just your pelvis against the saddle. And so while there may be initial like breaking in period when you're starting off your season and getting used to just sitting on a saddle, overall the shorts aren't contributing to the pressure points. And that's where the saddle fit is really important. I'd also say that when you go bike packing without chamois, you have a lot more space and your shorts dry a lot faster. So this is all personal journey, but I'm sharing it because it can be a great resource. And for me, it was one of the main ways that I was able to find a way to ride my bike all day for multiple days and be very comfortable and happy without any saddle sores or chafing. So if you want to go down this route, I just need to say this again. Do not start this on just a committing ride. This takes some time for you to get used to. You have to find the right saddle. If you don't already have the right saddle, start with a short ride and build up your tolerance and adjust your saddle and shorts as needed. For the shorts themselves, like shorts often still have seams. And so you do want to be mindful of the shorts that you're wearing. A lot of baggy mountain bike shorts are still made with the chamois in mind. So seams are just right down the middle. But there are some out there like the Patagonia Dirt Roamer that are seamless. And that feels amazing because you don't have to worry about seams at all. A lot of people also like to wear underwear under their shorts, and that can help kind of reduce that interface between your saddle area and your shorts fabric. So it's a little less important what the shorts are made of or the seams. And so some underwear that people really appreciate are like the Smart Wool boxers. And I know other people have commented on posts of mine in the past. So if you have a underwear that you recommend, you should drop that in the chat. And then tri shorts, especially if you like the compression of like a spandex short, the tri shorts can be a good option because those are made, so you can swim in them. So the pad, you don't want to be drowned by your chamois doing a triathlon is my understanding. So the chamois is really just like more of a maxi style pad. And so it takes the seam away from the middle, adds that tiny bit of padding, and also adds the other comfort and compression elements of shorts and bibs that people enjoy. I have ended up taking, when I want bibs or tight shorts, spandex shorts, I've taken bibs from places like Rafa and I've cut the seam out and just sewn in like a very thin, very soft, fleecy pad just to cover the seam. And it's an expensive way to go about that, but it works for me. And if you're trying to go bike packing for the first time without chamois, it's just a great idea still to have two pairs of shorts. And I would recommend one pair that's no chamois and one pair that's a chamois that you're used to. And then that way you can ride one day without chamois, one day with chamois, or you can even change in the middle of the day. Okay. Moving on to muscles and joints. Again, not a physical therapist or doctor. Just here to reiterate that and provide some guidance for how to prevent a lot of these aches and things. And remember that we have the ability to like make adjustments to set our bodies up for success. So a lot of cyclists, especially when hike a bike is involved, end up with Achilles challenges, the cleat position, and just the general like fore aft in relationship to your pedal can be a big part of that. And there is also a way to tape your Achilles in a way that helps alleviate strain on the Achilles. The tape, in a way, kind of substitutes the function of the Achilles. And so, if you are out there and developing an Achilles ailment, just having a roll of KT tape or athletic tape and knowing how to tape for that is something that you can do. And I've been on trips with people who have had to tape their Achilles because it's almost a debilitating, and then they're very comfortable and able to finish the ride. Um, the with the knees, this a lot of this comes back to the bike fit, but one thing with knees, probably Achilles and back and hips as well, is just remembering that like bike packing is hard. The physical challenge is hard. And there's a lot that you can do in even just a month leading up to your bike packing trip to prepare your body for the additional strain, like riding a loaded bike, building up your volume to mimic some of your longer days, and to do some strength training. Because a lot of the things that we feel a lot when we think about knees, backs, and hips, a lot of it comes to overuse while we're bike packing. And our bike fit will play a huge role in how quickly that is exacerbated. One thing that I just want to talk about with the back and hips, and really any of this, is just that well, back and hips and neck is just that going back to how we pack our bikes when we choose backpacks versus no packs. This is also related to your hands as well, that we often find backpacks a really quick and easy way to add capacity, because a backpack has the ability to carry arguably the most capacity. And the more weight that we put onto our backs, the more pressure we're going to have on our hands, the more weight that our core and our backs working to hold up, the more pressure there is on our butts as well. When we think about saddle sores, like a really quick or often easy way to reduce saddle problems is to take a lot of weight off your back. And that weight on your back, for those of us who do have lower back or probably any region of our back pain, due to other injuries or weaknesses, the backpacks can contribute to that. So it's not to say don't ever ride with a backpack. It's more to go back to that workshop on bikes and gear selection and being really intentional about when you're packing with backpacks versus really light hydration packs versus hip packs versus no packs. And that comes down to our terrain and your body. But that's one easy way to address these things. And then often for like long distance cycling, cyclists' necks can get really sore to the point that you can like lose function of your neck and your head. You can't really hold your head up. If you're bike packing with a light on your helmet, simply just removing the light and storing it elsewhere for when you're riding during the day can help reduce some of the weight on your head. It's really simple, but most of the time we don't walk around with a light with a battery on our head. And so suddenly then put into a position of leaning over and looking up, that can actually just be that extra strain that's causing your neck to actually eventually give out. And we're going to talk more about sleeping here in a minute, which is now the recovery. So there's a lot to recovery, but for all of those physical ailments, whether they're contact point related or more the muscle joints, there are a couple of things that we want to think about to set ourselves up for success for being able to ride day after day. Because a lot of us can hop on our bikes and have a pretty okay first day bike packing. But then it's like day 3, at least for me, day 3 or 4, that suddenly it feels harder. And that's that repetitiveness of riding day in and day out. And so the first one with recovery is just thinking about our energy. When we think back to what are those challenges that are physical and mental, bonking is one of the top answers. And we food and water plays such a role in this that the whole last or 2 workshops ago, workshop 3 was dedicated to food and water bike packing. And so we're not going to go through all of that because there's a whole 90-minute workshop recorded dedicated to that. But it's in all caps because of how important eating and drinking to help your muscles recover while you're riding, reduce the hole that you're digging yourself into each day, and to recover overnight. And then another one is just your temperature. This is very individual, depends a lot on what we're acclimatized to and the climate that we're riding in and the exertion that we're riding in, or the exertion level that we're putting out in each day, how fit we are adapted to the physical challenge of riding. But managing your temperature while you're riding is a really simple way to reduce some of the physical fatigue while riding. That can be as simple as just making sure that when it's hot out that you always stop in the shade. And it can actually take some effort to make sure you do that, but it can go a really long way. Or getting in water when you can, or making sure that when you stop at a break that you don't get cold. Just by putting a layer on and then taking the time to take it back off to keep riding, or taking the time to put a layer on before a descent. Those are small things, but they add up in the available energy that your body has. For mobility, some people don't need to think about mobility. They can just get off their bikes and go to sleep and wake up in the morning and feel more or less the same. Seems to be pretty correlated to age and injury history, and also just your general mobility and strength at home. And so that's kind of an as needed thing. But I think the reason it's here is just to remember that just because you're on a multi-day trip doesn't mean that all those things that help you at home have to go out the window. You can bring things like a little tennis ball or a band or some salves, or a water bottle that you can roll on if you roll a t-shirt over it so it's not rock hard. Those are all things that you can do. And then most of us you are often carrying like a ground sheet or a sleeping pad that you can lay on to do some mobility stuff at camp. Or if you're staying inside, it's even easier. And it's really easy to not do it. It's really easy to just sit down in a heap and be like, okay, I need to eat now and then go to sleep. So it's just oftentimes taking the time. And the last one on here is sleep. Someone mentioned earlier, and I loved this addition, that the not having a good night's sleep can lead to incredible physical and mental challenge when bike packing, and it's so true. And what makes good sleep varies a lot from one individual to the next. For a lot of my 20s, when I was bikepacking in different parts of the world, I was traveling without a sleeping pad or would sleep on like a car sunshade thing on the ground. And that's just how I was comfortable. But I was also like pretty Gumby as a pretty young adult. And now I need a full length inflatable sleeping pad, a warm enough sleeping bag, a pillow, a eye mask, ear plugs, and to not have any caffeine for the 10 hours beforehand. So things change. But the point is that when you're thinking, this goes back to the gear selection. What's important is that you get enough sleep so that your body recovers, because it's not just a mental and physical energy thing. It's also when your body is actually repairing. And so when you think about hips and backs and knees and Achilles and even saddle sores, it's when we're sleeping that stuff is actually has the chance of improving or not getting worse the next day. So making sure that you pack so that you can sleep. That's what's important. How you pack your sleep setup isn't cool if it's ultra light and what the professional bike packers carried when they were in their 20s if you don't sleep. and then you don't feel good the next day. So all of this can come into little self-care routines and practices when you're out bike packing. One of the first things I do when I get to camp is I change my bottoms and my socks. And for me, that is my way to start and I also clean my butt and saddle area. And I like to take like a antibacterial wipe or like a tea tree wipe. And that's what I use to wipe that area. I allocate one per day, or if I have the ability to bathe, I do that. But basically, taking a moment to clean that area and put on something, it's not necessarily clean, but it's not what you rode in. Like it's like your camp outfit, or even just like pulling off the underwear you were riding in and putting your shorts on or your pants on. That just gives it's like starting the clock for your butt and your feet to be drying out, resetting, and not continuing to stew in whatever it is that was created that day. um Rinsing and wiping your face and hands. The face part, I think it's mostly just like how I feel. I feel like I sleep better if I don't feel like I'm caked in salt, but I've also spent plenty of nights caked in salt. It's more of a hygiene thing. And hands, like it's really easy to not wash your hands when out, and especially if you're bike packing with other people, but also thinking about what it is that you're handling between your bike and your clothes and the cow poop covered water bottle to gas station doors and public restrooms. Like, just wash your hands. I think if we've learned anything in the last 3 years, it's that washing your hands is something that we can continue to do a lot of. Hydrating often, but again, when I get to camp, I go through my changing of clothes, the quick little hygiene thing, especially when water is limited. It's pretty simple and it comes down to just like the wipe. Um, and I have my recovery drink, which could be that like a chocolate milk mix or recovery mix, or just some sort of snack with some electrolytes. And again, that's all covered in the food and water workshop. Um, and then again, in the food and water workshop, we just talked a lot about the importance of food for energy and recovery, but making sure that those 4 different meals we talked about are a part of your routine, so that you are just continuing to give your body what it needs to be producing energy and to be recovering. And yeah, generally when bike packing, showering, swimming, bathing feels great when possible. And same with washing and rinsing your clothes. I don't wash and rinse my layers every single day. My skin seems to do fine with it. But if you're prone to salt rash, or you are really prone to saddle sores, or you're prone to like foot type funk, just taking the time to rinse, even just with water, your socks. And a kind of last ditch effort that I used to do on like month-long backpacking trips where we didn't get to wash much, would be to turn things inside out. And so it's at least one way to slightly change how salt and sweat are distributed. All right, so questions on the body, and then we'll spend the rest of this on mental skills.
There's not too many questions. I think some are getting answered by various folks. I don't know if you have any specific brands that you like for like underwear layers or base layers. I think anything additional to touch on other than what you shared already?
Yeah. That is a good question. Underwear layers. I mean, I think I just like to try to find some seamless underwears. Like I like the Patagonia underwear and base layers. One thing for people with female body parts is just the cotton underwear at night is actually more antimicrobial than synthetic. And so if you bring a pair of underwear for sleeping, then cotton is actually a good choice for that. Um, I did in the post workshop PDF link those Smartwool boxers that someone recommended, and I could go back and look. On Instagram, there were a lot of recommendations for underwear that I can dig up and link to that PDF.
What about for sort of mention of like what do you use for cleaning, like wilderness wipes? Any particular things I found? I like the wilderness wipes. I don't know. Tried alcohol wipes. Sometimes bad idea. Is then
um,
like normal baby wipes. I think lots of folks use those.
yeah, I kind of depends on what's available. Like if I'm resupplying those, even in gas stations, just the wet wipe brand, the red ones, those are I think antibacterial, and I mean they definitely have like chemicals, but they work, and I'm not using those every day of my life. But those are generally readily available at pretty generic stores like that. If I have the ability to buy stuff and pack from home, like the wilderness wipes are good. I like the desert essence tea tree wipes. They're actually for your face, and they're really little. They're about the size of like a this big, like 2 inches in diameter. And they don't have a ton of water weight in them. Like a lot of baby wipes actually do have a lot of water in them. And so if you're worried about weight, you can kind of like take some baby wipes ahead of time and let them dry out. And then you can rehydrate them a bit with water. Um, and just on this last trip last week, I found some like Burt's Bees eucalyptus wipes. They're like face and body wipes, and I took one per day for those, and that felt good. It felt like the eucalyptus was very cleansing and refreshing.
Um, Question on how to stay regular pooping.
Oh, that is a really good
People have answered that coffee is the answer.
question. Yeah, I
Maybe not
think
always.
yeah, not always. I think the first answer is hydrating. And I tend my regularity gets disrupted with travel. And I went over to Italy for a really big race for me and was having a really hard time adjusting. And I texted my physical therapist, who's a pelvic floor specialist. So pooping is part of her specialty. And she's like, okay, immediately when you wake up, drink a bolus of water, to which I was like, what is a bolus? Basically like a liter. And so the and then there's also some stomach massage that you can do that I'm not in a position to show you right now, but if you look like at abdominal massage or abdominal self massage for like constipation or something, or like bowel movements, like there it's effective. And so really hydrating, and like also in timing drinking like a full liter or so of water within a half an hour of waking up, and then some abdominal massage will help in addition to coffee.
Awesome. A question about the dish gloves. Do you wear those alone or over short finger gloves?
It just depends on the temperature for me. If I need the extra warmth of a glove, I would wear my gloves, which I tend to wear full finger gloves, or a thin camp glove. And if it's just to kind of like keep my hands from getting really wet, and also to improve like the grip on wet, slippery foam handle grips, then I just wear them without it.
What strength training for knees?
That is not something I could really cover in this, not being a personal trainer, but there's an article linked by a personal trainer in the post workshop PDF on strength training for bikepacking. And so that would help.
And then this
Also
is
noticing
another.
there's some really good beta on antimicrobial properties and wet wipes. And so read that if you're interested. I'm learning some things too.
Um, this might be too specific as well. There was a question of how or where to tape for Achilles, your Achilles.
Oh, yeah, that's something to look up on YouTube. Definitely.
What do you do if your ride socks don't dry out?
That's a great question. I think there are a few answers. The first is if you're hanging your socks outside to dry, in a camping situation versus like a inside lodging situation, that if you're in a really arid climate, they'll probably dry. If there's any humidity, they're going to be less likely to dry. And something that you can do once they're like more dry than they're actively drying is to sleep with them in your sleeping bag and have tucked under a layer against your body. And I don't like the feeling of them right against my skin because it's like wet socks against your skin. But if it's like over a base layer, but under a jacket, or even if it's just in your sleeping bag, stuffed at the bottom of your sleeping bag, your body heat will help them dry in most environments more rapidly than if they're just hanging outside. Again, if it's breezy and arid, they'll dry outside. So that's one trick to just to get them to dry more. You can also pull like, and this is a kind of a fine line, but if you're wearing warm sacred socks and well, never mind, we won't go there. But the next day, if they're still wet and you're about to go ride, if you have two pairs of riding socks, you could decide to commit one pair to just continuing to dry and wear your other socks. But more often than not, I just pull on my wet socks because my feet are probably going to get wet anyway that day. So at least they're clean and damp rather than, and then they're just slowly going to become less clean as you wear them. Like the point of it, of cleaning them, is to like get rid of the sweat and the salt and the dirt that would either like cause blisters or promote some sort of bacteria infection if you had some open type wounds. It's, and then most of the time we're dealing with wet feet, whether it's through sweat or water, regardless.
I think that was most of the questions.
Cool. I think I saw one about aero bars. Was
Oh
that
yeah.
discussed by
Yeah,
people?
do you recommend adding those like for potential other hand positions?
I think that for long road riding, it can be really helpful to have additional hand positions. However, there are a couple different little, they're not bar ends, but they're like little bar type things. I think some are called togs that clamp in the middle. So you get a little, they're almost like short, really short aero bars that you just hold rather than with the full arm paddle. Um, I think the main thing with aero bars is that there is a risk management concern that like you can't actually brake or steer very well in aero bars. And so you need to actually be proficient at riding in aero bars. And it's a far more aggressive, like a really incredibly more aggressive riding position that will recruit your leg muscles and your back muscles and your glutes and hip flexors differently than your normal riding position. And so just diving straight into riding long days in aero bars is not going to be a good thing to jump into on a bike packing trip.
Well, there was one other question I think I missed. Do you have any tips for inability to sleep related to high heart rate?
Oh, that's a good question. I've only really experienced that with like really high altitude. And so I think some things that generally can help just make sure that your heart rate is in set up for success is to make sure that you're really hydrated and you're fed. And then I think that like some breath work or meditation can help lower heart rate. And just taking time to wind down, but I don't have any like medical advice for other things to do.
All right, I think that's it.
Awesome. Cool. So we're back to this list, which there isn't a poll again. But when we think about those challenges, whether they're physical challenges that can impact us mentally, or they're just things that tend to challenge our minds more, which, as I also mentioned, can become more of a physical challenge as well. There are a lot of them because bikepacking has the ability, the potential, and likelihood to be really hard. And so to put us in the right mindset for the mental toolbox development for bikepackers, going to go through Some scenarios, examples from my um bikepacking endeavors that highlight what we tell ourselves matter. So this is just a quick flip through some interesting experiences that have tried my own mental landscape and physical landscape. That's not my foot, just so everyone knows. Uh, but I think that some themes in these things are situations that weren't necessarily fully expected. These are the screaming barfies, lack of trail, bonking, very long hike-a-bikes. And the point is that regardless of the situation that we inevitably find ourselves in when out bikepacking due to the unexpected or the unknown, or potentially even the expected, but just the chosen, our mindset can set us free because all of those experiences can still be hard, but at the same time, they can be something that is an accepted part of the experience that we're seeking and part of our why. And so, the first thing when thinking about how to manage the lows in bikepacking is to remember your why. Why is it that you're out here? And there's a very good chance that whatever it is that you're experiencing is a part of that. Like, in order to experience a landscape or to have a backcountry experience, you have to potentially be open to there being things like weather or downfall or overgrown trails. And if you're choosing to ride your bike for multiple days, things like mechanicals um, end up being a part of our why. So something that I like to tell myself is I chose this. And on the note of telling myself things, mantras can be a great tool for the bikepacker or the ultra endurance cyclist or just the person that's trying to navigate life with a bit more grace. And mantras are just short sayings that connect us to an intention or a purpose or a belief. And so here are a couple of mantras that I have used for myself. And there are a number of different ways that we can draw on those. Some of us have strong enough, powerful enough minds that they'll just pop into our head at the right when we need to hear them. That's not me. And so something that I have done to remember my mantras is to either to write them down on athletic tape and put them on my handlebars, which is incredibly powerful because when riding a bike, there's a lot of opportunity to see your handlebars. You can also use them as a saying in the morning. If you just journal or take a moment to think about the day's intentions, you can identify a mantra that you want to have for that day and kind of bring it through your mind. Can also do things like wear jewelry or clothing items, or even just like have a little thing tied to your bars or a patch on your feed bag or something that's just a symbol for you for that to remember some of these. These, oh, the temporary tattoos. I love that. That is a great idea. Because then you could put it anywhere, like right on your knees or on your hands. Um, on your riding partner's cheek. And so for me, these 5 are some that have been incredibly powerful. The topmost being, I get to do this. Because there is something around gratitude and remembering that we have a privilege in getting to go bikepacking, that even if it really sucks in that moment and you would want nothing more than to be teleported back home, that you still do get to do this and you get to figure out a way out of the hard situation that you're in. And that there's incredible empowerment and privilege in getting to do that. Remembering that it will get better. Most of our mental lows and physical lows are temporary. And as we've gone through in this entire workshop so far, there are a lot of things that we can do to accelerate the timeline of that low. But remember that it will get better. The sun comes back out someday. You get to camp someday and get to dry your clothes, change your shoes. You get to, if you don't have food, you'll get more at some point. If you're going up a hill, you'll get to the top someday. And so the it will get better is very reassuring that like this is temporary and it very much follows the I get to and I chose this. I can, and like this is one that you can say out loud, and the dot 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 is like I can X, I can Y. Like I can complete this climb. I can dry myself out. I can navigate this trail. Like all those things. Just telling yourself that you can do something versus I can't. It's taking the T out of I can't into I can. It's positive self-talk. And then the for the, and that's like the remembering your why and like what is it that you're here for. But that's also where the extrinsic motivation can be actually a tool. And I'm going to go through that some more, but a mantra can be like for the top, for the views, for the shared experience, for the pizza, whatever it is that is a reason to be there. And then lastly, my own personal mantra for a long time was you are unlimited. And it's just remembering that like while I may have some physical limitations that my or limitations based on like various different whatever situations in life that I have chosen or have inherited, that I still am unlimited by what my mind and heart choose to do. The next tool is to celebrate the victories. And it's so simple, but it is so easy when out there to just be going from one problem to the next or one challenge to the next. Okay, we made it to the top of this one. Okay, now we have to get down it and just going into the next, like always forward thinking and just taking a moment to just put your hands in the air and be like, we did it. And it doesn't have to be, it isn't the whole trip. It is part of the journey. It is, we are celebrating that we got to this resupply. We are celebrating that we got to camp. We're celebrating that we got going in the morning. Like we are celebrating that we weathered the storm, all those things. It's just celebrating the victories and the highs because that actually helps us suddenly feel like the lows aren't as overwhelming when you're very aware of how many highs there have been, whether they're as simple as seeing a wildflower or having a cool conversation with someone or having a really fun time on like a 2-minute descent to something really monumental, like that has taken a really long time or a lot of energy. The next one is just stopping and fixing it. And it's a mental, while this is a physical action, the stopping, it's a mental one because you have to give yourself permission to just stop and to take care of it. And this can be really hard when you're motivated by time or stressed by time in your itinerary, or, and especially for a lot of people and personalities, when you're in a group or with someone else. And so just taking the time to be like, I need to add a layer, or I need to just like change my clothes so that my butt isn't sore, or I need to just sit down and eat some food so that I fix this problem. And then often in a lot of bike mechanical type things as well, like they only get worse. All of it pretty much always only gets worse. So just take the time to just stop and fix it. Preferably in the shade or a warm spot, somewhere that just helps with that whole temperature management thing. The next one is to change your plan. Um, there are some of us out there that believe that plans are meant to be broken, and they're made to be broken. And there are some of us out there who believe that their worth or value or purpose in life is to fulfill the plan. And I don't think, and there are shortfalls to both ways of living. And I think that the takeaway for this mental toolbox piece is just to be open to changing the plan in order to make sure that your trip stays aligned with your why. And I'm not necessarily just advocating for throwing your hands in the air and quitting your trip as soon as it gets hard. I'm just saying that, if suddenly what you had planned on doing either isn't possible or is going to drain the resources, which include energy, of you or your group, or is as simple as like your goals will actually be met better if you change the plan, then just change the plan. And this can be as simple as like when you're and where you're stopping for lunch to as more involved as changing your route. Next one, grumpy, eat and hydrate. One thing that I do that adds to my tools for navigating the lows into highs is just making sure that I have a snack and some water with some electrolyte mix stashed away that I know that I can use if in an unanticipated moment. And so I pack food for what I believe I'll need, but then I have something like maybe a Snickers bar and a bag of nuts and a little electrolyte packet. And that is my anti-bonk, the bonk emergency stash. And they're usually stuffed down at the crevice of my frame bag. They're not where I'm just sifting through, and that way I don't have to consciously make the choice to not eat them whenever I want a Snickers bar, which is probably any stop. But it's that thing that for me, like the nuts have a lot of calories. The Snickers has sugar and calories and is just delicious. Um, and helps your mood, my mood. They often have like great sayings on them too. Like, well, I forget what they say. The word that came to mind was princess. But having some sort of emergency snack so that you have that on hand, the sugar and the salt that you need to just turn that physical bonk or mental bonk into being back on track. Going along with that is just take a break. It's so easy to be so mentally rigid in our plan of being like, okay, we're going to stop this many times this morning, or we're not going to stop until this point. But when you need some time to reset, just like get off your bike and sit down or lay down, take a nap. Like whether you're racing your bike or not, just taking a break to reset is an incredible tool, and giving yourself the permission to do that. And again, if you're with other people, just tell them that's what you're doing and that's what you need. And they either can do that with you, or you can make a plan for where you regroup and when. Okay, the extrinsic motivators, external motivators, bribing and rewarding yourself. Sometimes it just takes something as simple as a really good cookie at the top to just be like, okay, I'm just going to focus on the task at hand. And when that is done, I get this one thing. And that is related to, if I was really smooth, it would be the next one, which is breaking it down. And this isn't just like resetting your GPS or computer to have, rather than like a running tally or a running entire multiple 100-mile track to be thinking about into like more digestible chunks, but even taking your day and being like, it can be really daunting to think about the distance you're riding or the hours you're riding that day or what it will take to get there, but just focus on little chapters. And that could be the first climb. That could be to a certain landmark. That could be to a store. That could be to as simple as like, okay, I'm going to ride for an hour and then I'm going to take a 15-minute break. Chapter 1. And then chapter 2, you don't have to worry about chapter 2 until after chapter 1. And resetting the computer. that can be a great tool as well. Just being like, okay, I don't really need to see that I've ridden for 6 hours already and I know that I still have a long way to go. You can just hide the screen, hit reset after lunch, things that just help us be less daunted by the scale of what it is we're doing. Music for hard times, and then also caffeine, which is the next one, can both be performance enhancing tools. When used, um, okay, the way to say this is when your body isn't already really accustomed to both things. So if you always ride with music, riding without music will probably be hard, but riding with music won't actually make something that's hard easier. And then same with caffeine. If you always consume caffeine, adding caffeine isn't necessarily going to give you a mental performance boost, though it could feel good just because you like it. But if you save riding with music or save caffeine for when you actually want the benefit of it, then it can be a tool. And I think my main word of warning is just to be careful or intentional with like how you set up riding with music if you're riding amongst traffic, as we need to be alert cyclists on roads. And so my question for you to start to wrap this up is there anything else that you have in your toolbox that you would want to share in the chat for how to help turn lows into highs? I like to eat candy every 100 or 200 meters of elevation on a long climb. Yeah, that's candy can be great because there's so many of them and there's so little. It's like, okay, get one for every bit. Phone a friend. That's a great one. Totally. I love it. Mini bottle or two. Stopping taking pictures. That's really good. I like that a lot because it's reminding us of our why of looking around. Sometimes it just takes something as simple as pulling out a camera to remember what is around us and to get ourselves out of our own bodies and heads. Messages to loved ones. I think one as well that I didn't put on here is just keeping a journal. And that can be like electronically or good old fashioned paper and little pen, like little field notebooks, and writing down your experiences. Cause I think acknowledging what's hard is a great way for us to remind ourselves that we're capable of moving through it and setting us up for the next time we experience that challenge. Voice messages. Yeah, the real treat. It's my princess Snickers. um, oh, milk cream pie. Yes. Podcasts, talking to cows, or just talking aloud to other things. Awesome. So, one thing that I just want to circle back to is that this mental can feed the physical challenges can feed the mental challenges. Through planning, self-care, and our mental toolbox, we have all these tools for managing challenges. But it's ultimately, I think, for a lot of people, and this is affirmed through your answers earlier on your why and in that community bikepacking survey, that a lot of the things that we experience as highs are actually getting through the lows. Like, and this is more metaphorical, but being at the top of a mountain isn't nearly as rewarding if it didn't take any effort to get there. And a lot of times the efforts are the problems that we encounter or the struggles that we encounter that we navigate with our own skills and strengths and powers as individuals and as our collective group that is on the trip or the expedition together. And that in itself can be a really powerful tool for remembering when we're facing challenges when we're out bikepacking is that yes, we have this ultimate goal, but it's often this experience of riding the wave of the lows going into the highs and knowing with the highs too, like you're not gonna feel this great forever. And if you did, it wouldn't feel as great because you would just get used to it. It's all in context and in relationship to each other, the highs and the lows. And so with that, I'm closing with any questions. You all have been great in the chat. I'm loving all the comments. Shaking my fist in the sky and yelling, "Is this all you got?" I would be careful with that one personally. I think the world can throw a lot more at me than I want to get thrown at.
Well, I will just answer a question that keeps coming up about the recordings. So yes, I get lots of emails about recordings. So everyone that is on this, if it's your first time, I do send an email out after each workshop that I just add the new workshop recording and materials. So, and then I leave all the other ones in there. So there'll be like the ongoing list of all 5 recordings as of now. Some people might have trouble with not getting them. They come via MailChimp, so maybe add Noelle at bikepackingroots.org to make sure it gets delivered to you. But if you are registered, you should be on that list. And for the upcoming ones as well. And I think no more questions.
Awesome. Our next workshop is February 21st. It's with one of the series sponsors, Ride with GPS, which has also been a huge partner for Bikepacking Routes, as it is in their platform and their resources have enabled all of the route development that we have done, and it's what I've been using personally for my own bikepacking and backcountry riding. And we'll have a guest, Alex from Ride with GPS, to actually, it'll be a very engaging and interactive podcast because he's going to take all your questions that you submit in your registration to answer them and show you a lot of the how-tos on the platform, specifically tailored to your learning needs and desires. And yeah, thanks for coming. And I see a lot of appreciation for these resources, and this is made possible by Revelate Designs and Ride with GPS and Shimano for making all of these free for you. And if you want to support our work as well, then you can join as a supporting member. I'm looking forward to seeing you in a couple weeks.
Thanks, everyone.